Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. We have a 2012 Gibson Les Paul Purple Widow to document today, and this wraps up our documentation of all three series of the Widow. So what does widow mean within Gibson's vocabulary? It means the binding has color sprayed over it. It's not actually separate colored binding like purple binding, blue binding, or anything like that. It's just regular old binding that they didn't scrape the finish off of. And you can see evidence of that on the fretboard because the top of the binding is still that natural white/cream color, and then the edges are purple. The most visually striking thing about a widow has to be its headstock though. But where did these come from? Well, they were first birthed in 2009 by a Sam Ash exclusive called the Black Widow. It was based off of a Black Widow Spider. It had a red finish and kind of a dark burst on the outside. It was built like a historic R7 and it was chambered, but it still had custom attributes to it, like the ebony fretboard with block inlays and the Gibson custom emblem. Sam Ash then built upon that series with something called the Cobra Burst, which I've also documented. But after toying around with the specs with a few prototypes for a few years, Gibson decided to launch a new series of Widow and build them like a traditional Les Paul custom. So I call these the second generation Widows, but it's the first generation where you can find anything that wasn't red. But the attributes to Gen 2 are Rosewood Fretboards, because remember, 2012, very historic time for Gibson because that's when the raids kind of happened. They weren't really sure what the future was going to hold for ebony at that point in time, so they started using rosewood on these guys. Some other differences from the original Black Widow series are these are actually custom shop customs this time. They're not built to historic specs. So once again, you've got the back binding, they're not chambered. I believe they're 9-hole weight relief though. You've got the Nashville style bridge instead of the ABR1, full weight tailpiece. Instead of those Schaller tuners, these guys have regular Grovers. They don't have a fancy stinger on the back with an animal or anything like that. Now you're gonna see sources just vary everywhere as to how many were created, anywhere between like 15 to 35 of each color. But all I can tell you is that they were very limited, and probably for good reason. There's not going to be a huge market for a guitar that's just all one color like this, but there's enough of it that you can do a limited edition run, and that's kind of what Gibson was testing with Generation 2. They did 5 finishes that I'm aware of for the second generation. There's the Orange Widow, the Green Widow, the Red, Purple, and Blue. Now personally, I think orange and green are the coolest out of the original series because rosewood really matches those colors. But that doesn't mean the other ones are ugly because, I mean, look at this rosewood board. It's super dark anyways, but not all of them are like that. Now moving on to Generation 3, you can check out this video where I documented one of the blue ones. Essentially, the biggest difference between 2 and 3 is 3 then got the new Richlight fretboards on them, so they match a little bit better color-wise for most players. In fact, that's the big thing that Gen 3 has over Gen 2. You have more color options and they match better with the fretboard. And by more colors, I mean they introduce pretty much any color in the rainbow. They'll do anything for you on custom order. But on top of the gloss finishes, they introduced satin finishes, and you get a lift-in reissue case. So with ebony recently coming back into Gibson vocabulary, is a Generation 4 Widow starting to brew with a true ebony fretboard that kind of just makes it different from any of these other runs? Yeah, potentially. So I've had fun documenting all these Widows. All this whole Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, that's something I just made up in order to help illustrate this for you guys. Gibson isn't calling it these things, I just did it to make them make a little bit more sense to people just coming into the market and wanting to find one. In my personal opinion, Gen 1, the original Black Widow, will always be the most collectible because it birthed all this. Generation 2, while it might not be as desirable depending on what color because of the rosewood fretboard, I think that will still be more collectible than Gen 3 because Richlight, it's still kind of up in the air how people feel about it, especially how it will be seen in the future. So now that we know a little bit about the history behind the Widows and have finally wrapped up this series, let's go ahead, throw this one on the workbench and take an in-depth look at its specs. Inside the Purple Widow, standard custom shop custom here. You've got the 490R in the neck and the 498T in the bridge. That's the same stuff you'll find in a Les Paul studio. You either like them or you don't. They just say Gibson USA on the base plate. Shortly after this, they started doing that stickering stuff. Pickup rating wise, the bridge pickup is a hot 13.43, and the neck position is a more traditional 7.58. From the middle, just for fun here, you get about almost 5. Inside the pickup cavities themselves, you can see it's a short neck tenon, so not a historic long neck tenon like Gen 1. But notice in the bridge pickup cavity here, this one doesn't have that freaky ground wire like the Gen 3 Blue Widow I had. I'm still not quite sure what was going on with that one, but it doesn't look like we have any type of markings in these cavities. Just for the sake of full disclosure, it looks like at the factory they tightened that a little bit too much and it cracked the plastic a little bit. There's also like a little bit of a divot right there on that ring. And you've got some finger smudges that just don't come off of these pickups. But your bridge is a Nashville styled bridge, so it's not ABR1. It's just this kind. Gold Nashville that says PW on it. And the tailpiece is also gold and full weight. Moving around the rest of the body, just a standard 3-way toggle switch. You've got some light usage marks. I mean, this thing was sold to me as mint condition. I mean, would I call it mint? No, but it's very, very, very clean. I'm sure a professional polish job would make it look brand new. We've got speed knobs on here. Stock from the factory, they do not come with pick guards, so no extra holes or anything. Now, the only thing that I don't really like about the Purple Widow is it's such a dark finish, it's almost kind of hard to see the wood grain, especially when you got the light reflecting off of it or it's a dark stage. You really need something to illuminate this finish in order to see this. But you've got a maple top on top of a mahogany body. I'm guessing it has 9-hole weight relief with your traditional mahogany neck and then the Rosewood Fretboard. That's just kind of the quirk to Gen 2 Widows, the first generation that had other colors besides just the red one. You either love it or you don't, but I personally find these models to be more collectible. Face of the headstock. Now, something you can see going on with this one is you've got the typical tooling lines showing around all the inlays and the binding. I think it detracts a little bit from the beauty of the model, but unfortunately that's just what all Gibsons do. It just happens to be even more apparent when the inlays have been colored over. But we have a nut width of 1.67 inches. That increases to 2.05 at the 12th. First fret neck depth of 0.85, and you're almost at 1 by the 12th. And it has the traditional 24 3/4 inch scale length. Moving on to the back here, it's kind of a black finish. I'm sure it's actually a really, really, really dark purple on top of black or something like that. Inside the control cavity, you have the ceramic capacitors on there and just your standard Gibson branded pots with a gold output jack plate. And as you can see, this one has not been chambered. Toggle switch cavity, about the only thing special about these guys is their cover. In 2012, they were using this style. It pretty much feels like a gel sticker, but slightly firmer than that. I don't think it's actually metal that they put on there, though. These eventually switched over to metal plates, though. Back of the neck is the same as the body, just a very, very, very dark finish. You've got the Gibson custom decal with the Golden Grover tuners, and a custom shop serial number, which dates this one to 2012. And these do have thin binding in the cutaway, but you can't really see the maple cap. This example weighs 9 pounds, 2.2 ounces. Now that we know all about this instrument, let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. So in the end, would I suggest a Gibson Les Paul Custom Widow? I think it really depends. Do you love a certain color to death? If you do, then yeah, you're gonna dig getting a Widow in the finish of your choice. I mean, my mom really likes purple, so she fell in love with this one. But do they necessarily play or sound any better than any other custom shop custom? No. So it's just kind of a personal preference / collector thing. But if you think you might be interested in being the next owner of this guitar, check out that link in the description that will take you to the for sale page. But let's go ahead and review its condition. This guitar is in pretty clean shape. A professional polish job would take it up pretty much to brand new mint, but as it sits now, you've got some scratches and scuffs we need to talk about. So we talked about the tooling lacquer lines around the inlays. That's going to happen on every single Gibson. They just look a little bit more apparent on these because of the colored lacquer. The frets are in almost perfect shape. I don't think this thing was played all that much, but it was played a little bit. I just polished those up and I oiled the fretboard, so you're good to go there for another 6 months or so. The face of the guitar definitely has some polishing scratches and swirls. It's got some light picking marks, but nothing excessive. I would still consider this collector's grade for sure, but it does have some minor imperfections. We were talking earlier how there's a very small crack in the pickup ring right here and a few other imperfections on it, as well as some marks on the pickup covers that I was unsuccessful in cleaning off. But the gold for the most part is actually in pretty good shape. Moving on to the back here, you can see there's some light scuffing towards the top of the headstock. You do have a little bit of light edge wear as well. I didn't see any like major nicks or dings on the neck, just, some light handling marks from my playing demo and things like that. Moving on to the back, was there any buckle rash or anything? Not that I saw. I mean, you might see some very minor scratches or something like that. Most Widows are in a condition very similar to this because people are either too scared to play them because they think they're so beautiful or they just don't play them out. Now, I'm not quite sure how this happened, but there's quite a few scuff marks on the side. I'm not positive that those came from the case, but that's about the only thing I could think of, or if this was like on a stand and it scuffed up against another guitar. We haven't seen the worst of it yet. It's on the side that you see. It's right up here on the edge. You can see these scuff marks in this area. They're a little bit off-putting. I honestly didn't even try polishing those out, but I'm guessing they are just kind of lightly there into the finish. There you can see them pretty good. But I would say that's the only blemish this guitar really has. Let's go ahead and check it out under Blacklight. Hey, it glows a little bit here, so that means it was probably in the display in like sunlight or something like that. I'm not seeing anything that looks like a touch-up or repair on the front. We'll take a look around the edges, kind of by those scuffs. It doesn't look like it really broke the finish, so, maybe you can polish those out. Have to give that a try if I have a minute to do that. Yeah, everything's looking cool here. The back is also glowing very evenly. Move up the neck. No breaks, cracks, or repairs. I like the way that serial number looks. That's kind of cool. And then the face here. Yeah, this thing's cool. I like it. I wasn't expecting it to blacklight so much, but I guess if you think about it, it's almost 8 years old now. This guitar does come in a Gibson custom shop case. Unfortunately, I don't think this is actually the original case anymore, but more on that in a second. You've got all your latches, functioning handle, it even says the COA is still inside, and the interior is that dark burgundy color. Kind of works well with that purple finish. Double neck rest, good heel support, everything's good about this case. But now the sad part. Now, if you've been following my channel, you know that the guy that I bought these Widows from, he was supposed to give me purple and green from the 2nd generation. It kind of worked out in the end because somebody else wanted that 3rd generation blue one, so I sold it. But looking at the COA just now, it's not actually the matching COA to this guitar. But they were close enough I was able to forge the right one on there. So this originally belonged to a 2011 custom quilt top, and he probably just switched the cases. So for all intents and purposes, that thing's lost forever because he sold his whole collection. Or if you were miraculously able to track them down, I've ruined this COA anyways. Oh well. If you think you might be interested in being the next owner of this Purple Widow from the 2nd generation of Widows from Gibson, you can check out that link in the description that will take you to the Reverb for sale page. Thank you, Troglodytes, for tuning in today, and we will see you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.